Hi all, it's Dwayne Theobald here, coordinator of the University Writing Center here at the University of West Georgia. What I'm going to be doing today through this video is just kind of walking you through some things that I'm hoping will be helpful to you as you work on your upcoming writing assignment for the class you're in currently, but also maybe thinking about other classes that you're in now and will be in the future where you may have to employ some of these skills. I have titled this Moving from Reading Notes to Thesis to an Academic Paper because my goal today is to kind of walk us through what it means to take really good notes, really engaging with your text clearly, to then thinking about how to develop a really clear thesis statement, and then of course leading up to how to really engage with an academic, really engage in the act of writing an academic paper for an academic class. So I'm going to kind of transition between all of these ideas, hopefully giving you some little nuggets that will be useful to you this semester, but then also be useful to you as you move forward. Okay, so one of the things I like to start off with is just kind of saying something that I think we all think at various points, that writing is hard. And it is. I don't mean that it's hard in the same way for every person, or that we all struggle with the same things, but writing tends to be challenging for everyone. I think Snoopy says it best here. Good writing is hard work. It is hard work to be able to produce writing that is going to both do what you want it to do and reflect what you know about your content. But while it is hard, there are things that you can keep in mind, resources you can keep in mind, examples you can have at the ready to help you produce clear writing, coherent writing, really tight writing that will really, express what you're wanting to get across to your reader and will be impressive, and reflect really well that the content for that particular class or that particular subject area. So that's really my goal today, is to kind of, again, thinking about this idea that writing is hard and can be challenging, but there are things that you can keep in mind to make it a little bit less so. So when you approach a writing assignment, a couple of things that I encourage you to keep in mind. One, really look at and examine your topic. When you get an assignment sheet from a professor, make sure that you really examine that information. Take in all of the language that's there. Take in all of the guidelines that are given to you. If there are questions listed and things like that, make sure you read all of that and understand it. And if you don't understand it initially, go to your professor and ask them for clarification. You can also go to a classmate, but sometimes your fellow classmates might be confused or might be misunderstanding something in a different way than you are with an assignment. So it's always good to go talk to your professor and let them know, hey, here's what I think we're supposed to do for this assignment, but I'm not quite sure. Can you give me some feedback? Can you give me some suggestions? And I've never really met a professor that's not willing to do that and to help you out as you move throughout an assignment. I've already kind of pointed to this, but also really look at the language. Look at what words are on the top within the topic and within the assignment prompt. If there's questions listed, if there are keywords and phrases that are listed in there multiple times, maybe they're bolded, italicized, underlined, all of those, or a variation of those. Professors do those kind of things to almost serve as like flashing neon signs to let you know these are things you've seen before. We've discussed them in class. Maybe they've come up in other assignments, and you can utilize that prompt as a starting place to help you with the writing assignment that you're going to work on. Again, one of the things that's very true with questions in particular is that questions that are posed in class discussion that you've vetted a lot and discussed a lot, and ideally you've written down notes for those, you can then take that and in turn get started with the assignment. I also, of course, recommend that you do some brainstorming just to kind of generate basic ideas about what you want to do with your paper. Now, I'm not saying you flesh out every single thing that you're going to do in the entire paper, because a lot of that work comes in when you're in the body paragraphs and you're dealing with the text, the singular text or multiple texts that you're working with. But you do want to give yourself time to at least get a framework and kind of get some of the general ideas about your topic and how you want to approach it out on paper, or you can do it electronically via a Word document, but give yourself time to do that. There's a million different ways to brainstorm. You could Google brainstorming techniques and get a list that's pretty extensive. But my recommendation would be, at the very least, if you brainstorm and you have a method that works for you, keep utilizing it. If you don't brainstorm or haven't brainstormed in a while, I would encourage you to pick it back up for one of your upcoming assignments for this class or another. Mostly because, in my experience, as a writer and as someone who teaches writing and runs the Writing Center, I can look at a paper and I can tell if it has gone through some brainstorming, some outlining step, because the paper is better organized and has a better sense of where it's going than if somebody didn't brainstorm and didn't outline and take the time to do that little bit of work to help themselves out. And then, of course, you want to keep in mind that when you're thinking through your writing assignment, you then always want to be thinking beyond the brainstorming to what that thesis statement's going to be, what that goal is going to be once you've accomplished after you've completed your research and after you've, of course, written the paper. Is that argument going to come out to its fullest fruition? Is it going to really be explored the way that it needs to be? And is it truly going to be an argument? That's also really important to keep in mind as well. So this pertains specifically to the assignment itself. Like when you're looking at an assignment, you're looking at that assignment sheet, keeping in mind some of these critical things that will help you get started off on the right foot with that writing assignment. My other suggestion to you would be make sure you're taking notes whenever you're in class, in class discussion, when you're reading something at home or in the library, wherever it is you read and study. Make sure you're taking notes regularly. This seems really elementary. It seems very basic, but either one of two things tends to happen for a lot of students. One, you get out of the habit of taking notes, or you're just not a big fan of note-taking, or you simply get so wrapped up in a text that you neglect to take the kind of notes that you really need to. Note-taking is a part of being actively engaged with the text that you're reading, watching, listening to, whatever it might be. You do want to have those notes available to you to help you as you go throughout various stages of the writing process, particularly as you're getting started. And like I said, make sure you're taking notes during class discussion too. They're really valuable and they can help you with all parts of the writing process that you're going to engage in. When I was in grad school, this was especially true. Part of being in a classroom environment with other people is that you have the opportunity to contribute your own ideas and to hear from your professor, but you also have the opportunity to hear from people who are looking at that text in a different way, may come with another kind of background that lends to them having deeper analysis, or as I like to put it, I was in classes with people that were smarter than me. And I liked it because I learned a lot from those people. And some of the things that they would say in class could pair up with some of the things that I was thinking. And their ideas could help me develop something better for the assignment that I would write down the road. So know that taking those notes during class discussion is extremely important. You always want to keep that in mind. Now, on to brainstorming. So I mentioned this a little bit when we were talking through how to approach a writing assignment or a prompt. But brainstorming is really important. There's a million different ways to do it. A couple of them that I'm going to share here. Free writing, that is my favorite one. I do it old school style. I get out a piece of paper and I get a pen, or I could grab a pencil, and then I write and just take notes, cursory phrases, sentences, whatever sparks to mind about my topic, I put that down in writing. It's never beautiful and it's never complete. I don't think there is a version of brainstorming that could truly be totally complete, but I like to give myself 10 to 15 minutes to truly get some things out, because I know that there are some writers out there who can just sit down at a blank Word doc and start hammering out a draft. And if you can, kudos to you. I'm not one of them. I look at that cursor on that screen blinking at me and it scares the shit out of me. I don't like it. So I like to have something sitting next to me, and it's my brainstorming, to remind me that I do know something about my topic and here's what it is and here's how I can maybe get started with the drafting process. So you can free write, you can do listing or bulleting, again, jotting down words or phrases that deal with a particular topic. It could be the topic itself in the assignment sheet, or it could be one or more words from the prompt. And of course, you can do clustering, mapping, and webbing. You can visually draw out what you plan to do or what you want to try to tackle within your paper. For people who are very visually inclined, clustering, mapping, and webbing, all of those things work really nicely. Ultimately, and I mentioned this earlier, it doesn't really matter what kind of brainstorming you do. Again, do something that's going to work best for you. But I would encourage you to do it. This is especially true in classes where new or new to you writing skills get introduced, or parts of the writing process get introduced. If you're having to do research, if you're having to consider your writing approach from a different angle or whatever it is, if there's any opportunity for you to do brainstorming, I suggest you do it, but I especially would suggest that you do it in instances where you are encountering something new and you may be struggling a little bit with the writing process itself. So on to thesis statements. So thesis statements are really important. You want to keep in mind that, of course, you have one, and you want to make sure that it is doing several things. So the first thing you can think of when you think of a thesis statement is that it can serve as a roadmap for the paper, or in other words, it's going to tell your reader what to expect from the rest of your paper, really, where you're going to be taking them. It's a snapshot. It says, here's what I'm going to be tackling for the next 3 pages, 4 pages, 6 pages, however long your paper is. It also, in many cases, directly answers the questions asked of you, or more simply, it directly does what your assignment calls for. So a thesis statement can be an interpretation of a subject or a question, but it's never going to be just a statement about the text or the subject itself. So if you were to write a paper about World War II or Moby Dick, you would have to have a thesis statement that would offer a way to lead to deeper understanding about the war or the novel. So you would want to make sure that you essentially, dig beneath the surface. Don't just stick to this is this is basic information about the war. This is basic plot information about Moby Dick. You want to dig a little bit deeper, and we'll talk through an example here in just a few minutes. Biggest thing about a thesis statement, in my opinion, that's why I have it bolded and underlined, is it makes a claim that others might dispute. So you are putting together an argument. You are presenting that argument to your reader early on in your paper, and essentially it is possible for your reader to sit there and to read through your intro, get to your thesis statement, and say, I don't know that I agree with that argument. And if they say that, that's fine, because the way that a paper is written, you're at the ready with all of these body paragraphs of evidence that support that thesis, that give that thesis credibility, that demonstrates, even if you don't agree with it, here's why it's actually valid. Here's why it's really the case. And it is going to be, in most cases, a single sentence. Sometimes it can be more than one. I would say that's the case when you get into upper level classes, and if you go to graduate school, your papers do get longer, which of course in most cases means your thesis statement needs to be a little longer. So it's going to be a single sentence. It's going to be somewhere in your first paragraph. It's going to be the last sentence of your introduction. That is what leads into the body of the paper. One way to think about an introduction paragraph is to think of it like an inverted pyramid. You start out broad, you give broad information, or not broad information, but kind of a good context for whatever text or subject matter that you're writing about. And then you begin to narrow down your focus through your sentences to really what your paper is going to be about, which is at the very bottom of that inverted pyramid, and that's the thesis statement. So that's where you're really driving home to your reader, here's what I'm going to be discussing throughout the remainder of this paper. Here's what I'm going to be proving throughout the remainder of this paper. And again, the rest of the paper helps gather and organize evidence that persuades the reader of the logic for your interpretation, or what you're really doing in your argument. Now, once you've done some brainstorming, and then you have a working thesis, which a working thesis is, essentially, it is just exactly what it says. It's a thesis that you work with. As you draft your paper, it is entirely possible that you will find yourself working on that paper. You have that thesis statement, that rough thesis statement, and as you're working through the body paragraph, you come to some conclusions about what your argument really should be, and you flesh that out and flesh that out, maybe flesh it out and conclude it in your conclusion paragraph. And then when you're done, you read through your paper and realize, okay, my thesis statement is okay, but it doesn't quite match what I actually wrote and developed as I was finishing the draft. So all you end up having to do is take the thesis statement, tweak it slightly to make sure it fits what you've written. So once you have the brainstorming done, you have a strong, pretty good working thesis, you then want to make sure the thesis statement is strong and it's going to be able to actually hold up to what it should be holding up to. So a couple of questions you can ask yourself. The first one is the most basic one. Do you answer the questions, or are you doing what the assignment calls for? If you're not, you need to stop immediately and you need to go talk to your professor and get their guidance, or you need to come to the writing center and get our guidance. Make sure that you follow up with somebody who can help you out with that, because again, if you're not doing what the assignment calls for, it is entirely possible that you are going to miss some things along the way while you're writing the paper, and you're not going to do very well on the paper. You might not even pass the paper depending on how far outside of the guidelines you are. Have you taken a position that others might challenge or oppose? Again, is it truly an argument, or is it just an opinion? Again, opinions are fine and observations are fine, but they are not the same thing as an argument, and you want to make sure that argument is really clear. Is your thesis statement specific enough? What this boils down to is keeping in mind what your argument is, and then how many pages or how much word count do you have to play with. Sometimes when we're writing about topics, especially ones that we care about, we get ideas that are really big and really complex, and we like them and they seem great. And then you get started writing your paper and you realize, okay, this paper should be 4 pages. I've barely covered 1.5 parts of my full argument. So what you end up then having to ask yourself is, okay, how can I take what I've been doing and condense it to actually fit the guidelines for the assignment? And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you have an argument that is so specific that you find yourself running out of things to say to complete the paper itself. So just make sure to keep that in mind. Again, that is something that I will be honest with you, it gets easier the more you write because you start to learn yourself as a writer, learn how you compose and create your arguments, and it's easier to have that. It's easier for you to be flexible depending on what your argument is and how long the assignment is supposed to be. Does your thesis pass the so what test? This is one of the things that I would say of all the things with a thesis statement, this is the thing most people struggle with. And I will say most people, I'll include myself in that. You know, we can come up with an argument. We can come up with, you know, something to say about the text that we're analyzing or studying. But we then also have to consider the larger implication. So if I'm going to write a paper about Get Out and argue that it is not a horror film, that it is something else entirely, which I do believe, but again, this is not a solid argument. I'm coming up with something off the top of my head, but let's say you wanted to argue that it's not a horror film. Okay, why is that important? Why is it important that Get Out is not a horror film? Or if I wanted to say something else about Get Out, why is my argument important to thinking about Get Out in whatever genre it exists in? Why is it important in terms of what does it maybe have to say about Jordan Peele as a director? What kind of social comment? Why is it important that Get Out is making specific social comments and political comments within the film? You know, why are these things important? So think about that larger significance as you write. And again, the more you write, the easier it will become to have that so what in your mind as you create your argument. And of course, does your essay support your thesis specifically and without wandering? So after you have that introductory paragraph with the thesis, everything else that follows should connect back to the thesis in some way, shape, or form. If you find that it's not, let's say you have a couple of sentences where you got a little excited and chased a rabbit for a minute. Those couple of sentences could be really interesting, but if they don't really fall in line with the thesis statement, that's a problem. So what I usually suggest in this case is one of two things. One, find those couple of sentences and ask yourself, one, am I going to modify this to make it fall in line with my thesis? Or two, am I going to take what I have and take it and basically cut and paste into another Word document and save it for later on the off chance that I can use it later on in the paper I'm working on, or maybe on a paper that I will work on in the future. And now what I want to do is I want to walk you through how to actually construct a thesis. So the phrase often that's used is we're going to look at the good, bad, and the ugly. We're going to look at the ugly, bad, and the good. So we're going to kind of go in the opposite direction. One of the things that I think is true about everything with writing is it is a process. And when you go through and again, that's why we have the writing process, is that you have to do certain steps in order, ideally you do certain steps to get you to where you want to be. I would say with a thesis statement, a lot of people do exactly what I'm going to show you. They start out with a thesis statement that is not great at all, and they get to one that's and then they get to one that is ideally what they want it to be for that particular assignment. So let's take a look. So let's say we have the following scenario. Suppose your literature professor hands out the following assignment in a class on the American novel. Write an analysis of some aspect of Mark Twain's novel Huckleberry Finn. And you think, cool, I love Huck Finn. Good book. I can easily write something about it. So you grab a pad of paper and you write the following. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is a great American novel. Now, what I want us to think about here for a second is why it's weak. One, it's not very long, so there's not a whole lot of sophistication there in terms of language. But more than that, let's really hone in on this. You're saying in this thesis, Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is a great American novel. While that's a good thought, it's a good opinion, it's an observation you could make, it's not an argument. Ultimately, if you wanted to make this an argument, it should say something to the effect of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is a great American novel because ... or as can be evidenced through ... There has to be some other phrase there, some other information that really lets us know that this is truly an argument and that it's more than just an observation that someone could make. But keep in mind, though, it is not a horrible thing if you start here when you're going through thesis construction. If you need to start here with something that's simply an observation, that's fine. Do it. But don't feel as though, but don't feel bad if you do this, but also don't let yourself get stuck here either. Again, always be evolving, always be revising to get you closer to what you really want your thesis statement to be and what it should be. So let's say you do some additional thought, you give some other insights, maybe get someone else's opinion, and then you write the following. In Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain develops a contrast between life on the river and life on the shore. So we do have, of course, a little more language here. It's a little more sophisticated. Why does this one have potential? Or does it have potential? I would argue that it does. I think we're definitely getting closer to what a thesis statement should be. And one of the biggest ways that we know this is the phrase, develops a contrast between life on the river and life on the shore. That life on the river, life on the shore, that's a detail that can only come from the text itself. So it's clear to me as the reader, okay, so you're pointing to some textual evidence, or you're at least gesturing toward it, and you're going to do some more digging into it in your body paragraphs. That would be my expectation as the reader, and that helps a lot. So make sure that you have that in your mind when you're approaching your thesis statement. Again, going to the text for anything is going to help ground it and help keep it a little bit more where it needs to be. And then, of course, let's say you get to the final stage. You have examined evidence, considered your insights even more, maybe done some consulting with a professor or with another peer. Then you write this. Through its contrasting river and shore scenes, Twain's Huckleberry Finn suggests that to find the true expression of American democratic ideals, one must leave civilized society and go back to nature. So aside from the fact that this one is longer, because it is, why is this one strong? Again, it is longer. Again, it has more language, so ergo, it should be a little more sophisticated, although it's not always the case. The biggest thing to keep in mind here is a couple of things. One, we have a really good introductory phrase, through its contrasting river and shore scenes. So it's a good introductory phrase, but also we still have that river and shore scenes that ties back this idea to the text, which again is exactly what you should be shooting for. And then you have the title, the author and the title of the text, and then from suggest on, that's your argument. Here you're saying that in order to really understand what it means in order for you to embrace American democratic ideals, you have to leave civilization and go back into nature, which again, some people could agree with 100%, and then there could be some people who are like, no, that's not the case at all. So if that's the kind of reaction that's possible from this, you know you've created an argument, you know you've created something that is worthy of dialogue. So again, keep in mind, we went from the ugly to the bad to the good. And even this one isn't perfect. There could be some things that you could tweak here. Again, you're never going to produce a perfect piece of writing. I can almost assure you that's not going to happen. But you can always recognize that there are different ways to go about getting to what you want and going through a process, kind of going through, okay, here's just something on the page, here's something that's a little bit better, okay, here's really what I'm looking for. That can be really valuable, not just in drafting an entire paper, but even something like a thesis statement. So when you're thinking about writing a paper, again, we've talked about the paper assignment itself, we've talked about brainstorming, we talked about thesis development or thesis creation. Is it possible to take some of the notes that you've taken in class and that you've taken about text and then parlay that into evidence? And the answer is absolutely. As you're looking through your notes, consider what you privilege, what you write down in detail, what you write down multiple times, and usually that information can work its way into your paper. I can tell you from my own experience as someone who has studied film and has written about film, I can absolutely find things within film that interest me every time, or intrigue me or frustrate me, and I can then take that and consider that particular idea and the things that I wrote down about it to help me get started with that particular assignment. Of course, do give yourself time, however, to really vet the notes and the brainstorming that you've done. Everything you've written down is not going to make its way into the paper, but some of the information you have will and should. But don't feel as though you have to literally take your notes that you've written about a text or about a subject and reword it and fit everything into a paper. Because honestly, what ends up happening in these cases is that you end up kind of just hitting the kind of brush stroking, meaning you just kind of hit a couple of things here and there about the text rather than doing the deep analytical work that you need to. There's no burning need to have everything that's in your notes in your paper. Choose a couple of things that really resonate, that you wrote down, that you feel like you can talk about for X number of pages, and that's where you can go forth and get started. And what can be evidence? You know, how can we really look at evidence and find it? Just about anything can serve as evidence. So for example, if your argument centers around a main character, be sure that your body paragraphs deal with that person and how that character impacts your argumentation. Doing close character study can be really interesting. So do keep in mind that whatever you're talking about with that character, excuse me, I'm yawning, I do not know why. Whenever you're thinking about that character, think about how you can factor in different things that occur in the text and how that information can then impact the argumentation that you're putting together. And if your argument centers around a certain textual event, be sure to feature that event throughout the paper. Now, there's a disclaimer though. Anytime you introduce a character or event or anything like that, don't feel that you need to spend an entire paragraph doing so. Most of the time, a sentence or two will take care of it. This is really true when you're crafting an introduction paragraph. A lot of people think that there is the need to really spend time and really flesh out, this is the title of the film I'm working with, here's everything that it's about, and provide this long plot summary. You know, some writers, especially in film, for example, I use that example because I know it well, will almost feel the tendency to provide two introductory paragraphs, one that summarizes the film and then one that begins to get into the thesis statement. You just don't need that. Again, provide what little bit of introduction you need to, and then move forward with what you're going to discuss in that paragraph. Also, language or brief summary of events and or characters. So if you're looking at a particular text and there's some summary within it, or things that deal, or like some summary that deals with a character or two, you can use that as evidence. Inclusion of historical context as needed to help introduce something from the text. That is absolutely necessary at times, and it's perfectly fine to use as evidence. And also keep in mind too, direct word-for-word quotations from the text. and that can include dialogue, exposition, things like that. All of that can serve as evidence. I'm a big proponent of pulling in direct word-for-word quotations. I love to do it. And mostly because I like my own words, I like the way that I phrase things, but sometimes you read an article, you read a text, and you're like, damn, that quote is awesome. I want to use it. I want to figure out a way to meaningfully use it in my paper. And you can find that. I can assure you, you can find that. It just takes a little bit of time. And of course, make sure that you're not relying too heavily on evidence from the texts, the text or texts that you're working with. Again, you want to have other voices to come in and support you and support your argument, but you don't want those voices to take over and become the driving force for your paper. Again, you need to be sure you have your voice featured in your paper for the majority of the time, and then bring in other people to help support you. So now that we've parsed through notes and we've talked about thesis statements and brainstorming and all of those things, let's talk a little bit about what it means to move from those loose notes to a fully formed paragraph. So the first part of a paragraph is crafting a really clear topic sentence. It is a mini thesis that really speaks to part of your larger argument. It lets your reader know, here's this little nugget from the argument that I'm going to discuss in this paragraph. And the same can be said for all of your body paragraphs. It should remain an argument and ideally be something that you can speak to or prove just within the confines of that paragraph. There are some times, depending on the length of your assignment, where you may need to take one point and extend it over the course of 2 paragraphs. But I'll be honest with you, the instances where that happens, again, the paper needs to be pretty lengthy and the argument needs to be pretty beefy for you to take that on. For now, I would say one topic sentence that is in charge of and encapsulates 1 point for that one body paragraph. And of course, your evidence. Evidence can take a lot of different forms. We talked about them. It can be historical context, direct quotes, paraphrase material. I mean, it can be a variety of things. And again, the kind of evidence that you use is going to vary from paragraph to paragraph. And of course, the third step is the actual analysis. Don't just leave evidence hanging there for the reader to figure out why it's there and what it means. Provide the evidence and tell the reader why it matters. One of my pet peeves as a writer and as someone who works with writers is when I see a quote in a paper and there's no follow through, there's no follow up, there's nothing that lets me know why it's there. Because, I mean, and this is true for a lot of writers, when you're looking for a particular text, when you're looking for a particular piece of research, when you find it, you feel like you have found the holy grail. I mean, it might not be true for everybody, but I'm nerdy. I get excited about it because sometimes that can take a while to find that particular piece of evidence that really does what you want it to do. But when you find that piece of evidence, take the extra step to then say, okay, here's the evidence. Here's why it's important. So make sure that you give time for that. And this tends to be, or it can be, one of the more difficult parts of writing a paper. So make sure you dedicate enough time to this step. And especially when you're working with maybe a tutor, a classmate, someone is reading maybe through your work, you know, let them know that. Let them know that, hey, this is something I tend to struggle with. So can you, when you're looking through it, make sure that I'm actually explaining my quotes and connecting things the way I should be, instead of just leaving the quote there for the reader to figure out. I mean, a lot of readers are sophisticated enough that they can figure out why a quote is where it is, but you don't want your readers to ever feel like they have to do that. You want to try to give them as much explanation and context so they can understand what you're saying in every aspect of your paper. What I want to do now is I want to talk through a couple of examples. So I'm going to detail this one a good bit, and then I'll move on and show you briefly the example of using evidence and kind of looking at an example paragraph from a film. So for this one, this is actually a sample of one of my papers. I just used, in cases like this, I tend to like to use mine. One, because I know them well, and 2, I know they're not perfect. And I know there's things that I could change about them. But I like, one of the things I want to show you is really the structure, how to look at the particular body paragraph. So one of the things that you'll notice here, I'm writing about the text, The House of Mirth, by the way, by Edith Wharton. One of the things that you'll notice here is, if you're looking up here at the very top, the first part of the paragraph, I start off with some textual details. So Lily's reliance on others and her parasitic nature can easily be evidenced through her initial overnight stay with Gertie in chapter 14 of book 1. So I'm grounding you in text. I'm grounding you in a particular textual moment. And then I provide some quoted material. Now, you'll notice this particular quote is pretty complete. There looks like there might be some things that were omitted. I can't quite remember, but again, you have pretty much a complete quote here. And then, of course, you have your parenthetical with the citation as it should be. But of course, there are also some places throughout this body paragraph where I do incorporate evidence, but it's just little short phrases, or again, just a couple words here, a short phrase there, just little bits of the text. And including those little bits of the text serves as support, obviously, but it also helps give flavor and variety to your writing, which is often very helpful, and we want to keep that in mind. So I spend time kind of giving some information about the text and about this particular occurrence in the text, and then following up with the analysis and thinking about why this information is here. And let me take a look. Right here. So pretty much from during onward, that's where you're getting a good bit of your analysis and connecting the text and some of this language to the argument that I was arguing about this text. Now, again, you'll still see, some of these quotations fall within this, and that's fine. One of them here does. But make sure that you do have that follow-up. Make sure you do have that support that really makes it clear why you've spent time discussing this particular instance in the text and why you've spent time fleshing out or providing bits and pieces of quoted material. And then for film, it's essentially the same setup. This is a very long paragraph. I do apologize. It's a lot on the eyes. But essentially you do the same thing. You introduce the film, or in this case, I introduced the film because the paper I wrote that includes this paragraph, I actually wrote about 2 films. So this was the instance in the paper where I introduced the first film and started discussing it. So you notice I introduced the film, give a little bit of context to what's happening in the film, and then of course I cut to one specific scene where, in this case, Bobby Dupuis is talking to Rayette, and again, kind of being verbally caustic to her, being very negative, and again, just including some of those textual details. And in this case, for a film, it's dialogue is what I like to include. So of course, you introduce the text, provide some of the quoted material, provide some evidence, and then of course, make sure to connect that back to the thesis statement itself. So I hope all of this information has been helpful. Again, I feel like I've thrown everything in the kitchen sink at you by this point, but I hope by just having some of this information and kind of letting it wash over you and seeing it from someone different and seeing it in maybe a little different light, it'll help you as you approach the upcoming assignment for this class and other assignments you'll do for other classes, which then leads me to finish with the Writing Center's information. I run the center, so I do want to make a plug for it real quick. We are here to help you with any kind of writing assignment in any class, and I do want to really emphasize that. A lot of people think we're only here for English classes, and that's it. And we are here for English classes. Our bread and butter is English 1101 and English 1102, but we do help students out with other assignments as well. And all you have to do is reach out to us and let us help you. We are in TLC 1201. If you don't know where that is in TLC, look around the first floor and you will run into our door because there's a huge mural that covers the entire entryway. So it's easy to take note of. Come and see us at any point during the writing process. If you're finished, if you're at 2 pages of 4 and you've hit a wall and would like some help, maybe you want to sit and brainstorm with somebody before you get started. Those are some of my favorite sessions. I absolutely love brainstorming sessions. All that we ask is that whenever you meet with us, just let us know what you need help with. Give us an indication of what you're struggling with, what questions you have, and we'll do what we can to answer those questions and address those concerns before you leave us to go continue working on the paper. I do, of course, ask that you come in before it's urgent. Don't wait until the day the paper's due. Don't wait an hour before it's due. Try to schedule in a little bit of time for you to come in, get the help that you need, and leave and then have some buffer time to make some changes to that assignment, and then go to turn the assignment in. I recommend, if you can, give yourself a buffer day between utilizing our services and then turning in the assignment. That way you have a good bit of time to play with. We will do a lot of things to help you out, but the one thing we will not do is edit. We do not edit papers or proofread papers. But like I mentioned earlier, if you know you struggle with a certain something, maybe it's a grammar issue, maybe it's a couple grammar issues that you just know you struggle with, or maybe you have a professor who's told you struggle with it. Let us know. We'll look for that in your assignment, give you feedback, and in many cases, we'll give you resources to help you as you move forward. So, because we are living in COVID times, that's the nicest way I can think to say that, we are actually serving students here on campus in 3 different ways. So we are providing, of course, some of our traditional face-to-face availability. You can stop by our office, call us, or email us to set that up. When I say it is limited, it is very limited. We are only allowing 3 appointments in the center at a time. They are very spaced very easily to accommodate social distance, and the center is being cleaned every day, thoroughly, to ensure that germs and everything are taken care of. And I can say this with confidence because I'm the one doing it. So know that if you want to take advantage of face-to-face, it's here. We're still here to help you. Also know that we have our asynchronous paper review. Every student on campus, undergraduate and graduate, is enrolled in a Writing Center course. It's called University Writing Center Online Consultations Fall 2020. It's a bit of a mouthful, but if you have seen that in your Course 10 homepage, the picture is actually of the back of a guy's head looking at a computer. That is us. You can click onto our course, upload an assignment with guidelines, and we do ask for a couple of things. And we can get you feedback in 48 hours or less. Currently, we're on the under 48 hours, but the further we go in the semester, we're going to be hitting that 48. But know that that's available to you. Just keep in mind, give us what we ask for in the assignment drop box, and make sure the assignment you submit is no more than 7 pages. And if you would like to schedule a synchronous video session, I have done a couple of these recently. They're really helpful and really easy to do. You can email us and we'll get that scheduled, and you can actually have a virtual meeting one-on-one with one of our consultants, and they'll help you. You can screen share your paper, share the prompt, do some brainstorming on a whiteboard, things like that. And the hours and availability are on our website, which is this address right here. If you go to our website, on the homepage, there is a gray box. It has all of the information I just gave you with the days and times that we're available for all of those different modes. So do keep that in mind. Again, there are a location on the screen, our phone number, and our email address. Reach out to us if you have any questions about anything to do with the center. Also, feel free to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We do post things that are important that relate to the center's operations, things for you to keep in mind as you move forward. But we also will share other things that other departments are doing because we want you to be in the know as much as possible. The graphic over here to your right is the graphic we have for the semester. There are a good number of them on bulletin boards throughout a couple buildings on campus, and they are also on television monitors in different departments as well. So if you happen to see one, take note, that's us, and our contact information and availability is on them. And then the very last thing here at the very bottom, this is my contact information. That is my work office number and my email address. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, and again, I know I've covered a lot of ground, anything I've covered today, send me an email, give me a call. If you have questions about the Writing Center, email me, give me a call. I'm very accessible. The best way to reach me of the two is email. I'm not always physically in my office, but if I'm not in my office, you can send me an email. It doesn't matter where I am, I have my phone on me, and I can respond to an email and help you out in any way that I can. The last thing I want to leave you with before I wrap up, I know that what we're dealing with right now is with COVID, and everything is really complicated. I mean, we're living through a pandemic, and that is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to make light of it. It's very challenging. But even with that challenge, one of the things I want you to know is that there are people on this campus, and some that aren't physically on campus, that are here to help you in any way that we can. Your professors are being supportive, of course, and helping you through your classes, but there are also support services and offices like the University Writing Center that are here for you. And we want to serve you and help you get through this semester and do well this semester. All that we ask in return is that you just reach out to us when you need us, and we'll take it from there and help you as much as we can. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to me, reach out to the Writing Center. We will do what we can to support you and help you produce really good and clear writing. So take care, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.